Today we're going to learn another lesson from the life of Joseph about new normals and what it's like when something changes in our life, but now it's new. We'd like it to be the old way, but it isn't. So how do we adapt to that? Join us today to find out. Good morning. Welcome to our Encouraging Truth series where we hope to encourage you every Monday morning so you can hopefully have a better week focusing on the things of God. Today we are going to talk about this whole idea of new normals that come into our life. For many people it's the new job, the new home, the new school, the new empty nest stage of life. For some of you it's the new life without your spouse. Some people it's the new life after high school or college or whatever it is. So our encouraging truth number 83 today is this: new normals can be a really good thing. And today we're going to learn this from a man by the name of Joseph. We've been talking about Joseph the last few weeks in our Encouraging Truth series. In our last lesson we realized and learned that Joseph was one of 11 boys at the time. His older 10 brothers, stepbrothers actually, hated him. Mostly because they were jealous of him because their father loved Joseph more than anyone else, which is super sad that he portrayed that to his other kids. But the problem is that his brothers were filled with anger and jealousy and bitterness. And so in one rash moment, all of their lives were severely altered because of this. Joseph showed up where his brothers were shepherding the sheep, and his brothers called him the dreamer. They were angry with him. They threw him in a pit, and then they sold him to some slave traders, to some traders on their way to Egypt, where he would eventually become a slave. Think of the shocking turn of events and this long journey that Joseph would be on. There were no cars or planes or trains or any of those things, so they had to walk to Egypt, which would take weeks and weeks. But it made me think that during that time, he had to have been so confused and angry and frustrated and wondering, how in the world did I ever get to this place? Which might be where you are today. Maybe for you, you're kind of in the middle of this trek to what you feel is Egypt. Thinking, what just happened? What just happened to my life? So today I want to give you hope, and I want to give you hope from what God tells us. John 16:33 says this: Jesus said, "I have said these things to you that in me you may have peace, because in the world you will have tribulation, but take heart, I have overcome the world." See, Jesus didn't say you might have tribulations. He said you will have tribulations. You will have journeys to Egypt. You will have times in your life where everything changes and you just don't even know what to do with it. But we see the rest of the story in Romans. Romans 8:28 says this: "And we know that God causes all things to work together for good, to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose." See, what we need to realize is that any change in our life, that God can work those things for good, even trips to Egypt. Max Lucado wrote this illustration in a book called You'll Get Through It. We've used it here in, I think, probably this series. But it's got a really great point to it. He said that the state of Texas was rebuilding a highway near his house. 3 lanes had been transformed into 1 lane, caused a ton of traffic problems, traffic jams. People were frustrated, honking their horn, just frustrated with this whole road construction thing. But he said his next door neighbors had a completely different perspective of this road change, because they were highway engineers and they worked for the Department of Transportation. And so they endured the traffic jams and the frustrations because they had seen the master plan. They knew exactly how this entire traffic road project was going to turn out when it was all said and done. But yeah, for the moment it was frustrating. But they could see something so much bigger. See, that's how our new normals need to be met. We need to meet our new normals with a smile, knowing that our master builder, master planner, God, has his own plans for our life. And he promises, it's a promise, that everything will work towards something that's good. Now I can imagine for Joseph, he didn't have that attitude right away. He was probably terrified. He was younger, a teenager maybe. And he was wondering every day, like, where's my dad? He probably kept looking behind him like, is dad coming after me? Did my brothers tell him what happened? Like, what's happening? And yet day after day, nobody showed up. Nobody showed up to take him back to his old life. And see, we're so much like that. We keep expecting to want to go back to the way things used to be. And yet for most of us, we need to realize that God gives us a new normal. The new normal for some people could be going through life single after a divorce. That could be your new normal. It could be meaning you're jobless for a while, and maybe you have to move out of the apartment or move out of the house because you don't have a job any longer. For us, when Rob worked for his family business, we had 5 kids at the time, and Rob was making really, really good money. And then one day he just called and he said, I quit my job. I'm like, you did what? You quit your job? Like, why would you quit your job? But he did quit. And that entailed us moving out of our house, and we had no money. And my mom, bless her sweet little heart, she would bring over like laundry soap and Downy because we were making a lot of money, and now we weren't. And we moved out of our big, beautiful house that we actually loved. But God had a really good plan for that. Didn't see it at the time, but looking back, I kept thinking, I just want to go back to my old life. I want to go back to where it was because it was easy back then. But things in our life, God doesn't always make things easy for us because he wants us to grow. He wants us to grow and change and grow closer to him. And we can't do that when life is just the same every day. For some of you, it could mean your new normals, you got sick and you've been bedridden. And you're like, I don't like this. I want to go back to when I was healthy. Maybe your new normal was when your last child got married. And you're like, no. I want to go back to the days when my kids lived at home with me. But what if we could change our perspective? What if we could look at all of the changes just like the highway engineer did in Max's book? What if we could look at everything like, okay, this is a new experience, God. Let's go. What do you want me to do? What can I do to be the best follower of yours around? But like I said, the problem is we keep looking back at how it used to be. My parents have a friend, and she rode horses, and I feel like she fell off of a horse. She did something to hurt herself really bad. But now she really can't ride. And she said this, she said, my body tells me I can't ride. My mind tells me that I can, but my body just says something different. I wish they would both like be in sync, because that's what we want it to be. Where she wants to be, where she can just get on a horse and ride like she used to, but everything's changed. She has a new normal. See, what happens is this: we often become so focused on the past that we don't know how to embrace our new normal today. And it's like this equation that we've talked about for the last couple lessons, that we need to learn to add God into the equation of anything new that comes into our life. Because if we don't, we talked about this, if we say me plus my problem, it's going to usually end up with bitterness and anger and frustration. But when we add God to our new normal, it's me plus my problem. My new normal plus God is going to equal peace. Because we have to believe that God knows exactly what he's doing. And when we live like that and we can accept our new normal, something that's new and exciting, you know what happens? We grow up spiritually. We grow up where we suddenly learn how to trust God. We mature in our faith. We mature in our spiritual life because we don't have anywhere else to turn but upward to him. Because here's the good news. Look at Genesis 39, verse 1. Now Joseph had been taken down to Egypt, and Potiphar, an Egyptian officer of Pharaoh, the captain of the bodyguard, brought him from the Ishmaelites who had taken him down there. But look what the Bible says. The Lord was with Joseph. So he became a successful man. And he was in the house of his master, the Egyptian. In Joseph's darkest hour, when he just felt like there was no hope and my life is so changing, the Bible tells us the Lord was with Joseph. And that is a word for you and me today, regardless of whatever dark place you're in. Here's what you can be assured of. You can be assured the Lord is with you also. God had a purpose for Joseph and a plan which included really, really tough days, really dark days, which included heartache and sadness and betrayal and change and all of those things. But I think a lot of our issue is that we have this fallacy that the Christian life should just be easy and God should always make us happy. We were taught that somewhere along the line that if you follow Jesus, everything's going to be great. And so we want to make sure the bills are paid and the sickness is temporary and the kids will never do drugs. We want that in our life. But the greatest thing we can learn from Joseph is that that's not really true. Being a Christian and following Christ does not ever guarantee that you're going to have a really great, easy, simple life. God allows us to have seasons where we're going to be on the road to Egypt, looking around going, how in the world did I just get here? But if you are a Christian, if you are a follower of Jesus, you need to remember God is not shocked at what's going on in your life. He might have moved you to a different place. But here's what we know. You can know without a doubt that God has a reason for allowing what has come into your life. Think of this. When Joseph was back home with his father and brothers, he was taken care of, he was coddled, he was pampered. And God knew in that specific environment that Joseph would never grow up to be the man that God needed him to be. God needed Joseph somewhere where God could stretch Joseph's faith, where God could teach Joseph to trust him. And sometimes I think God has to do the same for us. Sometimes he pulls us out of really easy, simple situations and puts us in situations that are really out of our control, that really feel uncomfortable, that places where we have to learn how to lean on God only. He's the only one we can lean on in situations like that. So when life changes, we need to learn how to put God in the equation. When life takes a turn for the worst, we need to not panic. Our first tendency is to be fearful, anxious, and start questioning God. Where are you, God? Don't you see what's happening? Why aren't you stopping the pain? Why can't you give me my old life back? And yet when we can insert God into our circumstances, everything changes for us. Now instead of questioning God, we can say things with confidence. Like, God, I know that you're there. God, I know you see everything happening in my life. God, this is so painful, but I know you're going to use this pain for good. God, I loved my old life. I would love my old life back, but I don't think that's what's going to happen. So you know what, God, use me in my new normal. Use me in my new life. See what happens when we add God into our difficult equations? We go from this inward focus, like it's all about me and poor me and I'm sad and me, to an upward focus. Instead of looking how discouraged we are and how pathetic we feel and all those things, now we can look up and say, God is in control. It's then we can stand on his promises. Look at Isaiah 41:17. The afflicted and needy are seeking water, but there is none, and their tongue is parched with thirst. I, the Lord, will answer them myself. As the God of Israel, I will not forsake them. That is God's promise to us. He's not going to forsake us. Psalm 94:14, for the Lord will not abandon his people, nor will he forsake his inheritance. He has not abandoned you. 1 Samuel 12:22, for the Lord will not abandon his people on account of his great name, because the Lord has been pleased to make you a people for himself. God promises that when we trust him, he will never, ever forsake us or abandon us. But that doesn't mean we're not going to have really difficult days in our life. We have some friends who love Jesus, very, very faithful to him, faithful in raising their kids to love Jesus. But one day they got an early morning phone call that their son passed away at a very, very young age. The most devastating news that any parent could ever have. In the dark months afterwards, our friend said, she always felt that God was faithful until that moment. She said, I always prayed for our son. I always believed that God would take care of him. And yet one day he died. And for her, it was so difficult to reconcile God's faithfulness with this horrible tragedy. I think Joseph probably felt that way, and many of you probably feel that way too. But the good news to this is that this couple, were they upset with God? Yes. Did they probably scream and cry a lot? Yes. Was Joseph mad at God? Possibly. But this situation would have ended differently had our friends or Joseph or maybe you or I, if they forgot to add God into the equation. But they did. They added God into the equation. And in their darkest hour, they clung to God instead of pushed him away. Here's what we need to remember. Our job will be to stand on his promises and not on our feelings. I bet Joseph was sad. I bet Joseph wanted to go home to see his dad. But God did not make that happen for 22 years. But during those 22 years, the Bible says the Lord was with Joseph. I bet Joseph hated being a servant, and yet God kept him there. Why? Because God always has a purpose for where we are, even if it's not where we want to be. Here's what we need to know. The day will come when you will have to do what Joseph did, which is move on. Accept where you are and move on. Genesis 39, verse 3. Now his master saw that the Lord was with him, and how the Lord caused all that he did to prosper in his hand. So Joseph found favor in his sight and became his personal servant, and he made him overseer over his house, and all that he owned he put in charge of. It came about that from that time he made him overseer in his house, and over all that he owned, the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house on account of Joseph. Thus the Lord's blessing was upon all that he owned, in the house and in the field. So he left everything he owned in Joseph's charge. And with him there he did not concern himself with anything except the food which he ate. Now Joseph was handsome in form and appearance. For Joseph, life was changing. He recognized his dad was not coming for him, and he most likely accepted the fact that he would never go back home to his family. But for Joseph, he decided it was time to move on and accept where God was placing him. For many of us, that's what we need to do. We need to move on. And that could play out in so many scenarios. I had money. Rob and I used to have lots of money. But then we lost it all. Stock market, 2008, all the crazy stuff. But you know what? I had to learn to move on. We ended up selling our house. We ended up doing things but you know what? I love my life now. And it's because I moved on. And I said, God, I'm going to be joyful wherever you move us to. For some of you, I was married and my spouse walked out on me. Well, you know what? Maybe for you, it's time to move on. It's time to enjoy where you are, this new season in your life. For a lot of people, as I raised my children, they were such a big part of my life, and now I'm left alone. Well, it's time to move on and find new friends and find new things to do. For some people, it was I had a job I planned to retire from, but I was let go before that happened. Well, you know what? It's time to move on. Find a new job. Find something else to do. For a lot of people, there's so many things I planned on doing in my life, but I just found out I'm sick. Well, it's time to move on. You may never get to do those things you always wanted to do, but you could be the best sick person there is around. For some people, it's my best friend betrayed me. It's time to move on. Find some new friends. How about my employee started his own business and now he's in competition with me? Okay, move on. Trust God. Do something else in your business. It doesn't have to end right there with being angry and bitter. Because what we learn from Joseph is this: in order for God to get Joseph to the place that he needed him, here's what had to happen. Life as he knew it had to change. It just did. We see it all through the Bible. But Joseph learned he had to move on. He had to forget the past. He had to enjoy and be joyful at the place where God placed him. He learned that in life, as we all need to learn, is filled with chapters, new chapters. And the life he knew living with his father and brothers, it was gone. But God did something new for Joseph, just like he's going to do for you and I. And it may not be in a day or a year or even 5 years, but the amount of time doesn't matter. But what does matter is that when God changes things for us, what matters is our attitude. What we see from Joseph is he doesn't sit around and complain. He actually made the best of the place that God had taken him. He dug right in where he was, whether he liked it or not. He didn't get depressed. He didn't let bitterness for his brothers destroy his life. Because of his attitude, those around him saw something that set him apart from everyone else. Think about how we react when life changes. Are we constantly complaining? Are we unhappy? Are we constantly negative to those around us? Are we consistently talking about our problems and this isn't fair and this is not right? Because what we see from the life of Joseph, as far as we can tell from Scripture, is that people never saw a negative side to him. Instead, they saw a man who trusted God, and that was very appealing to those around him. Consider what our purpose is as a follower of Christ. Our job is to love God, share Jesus with those around us. But many times, the people that need to hear about Jesus are in places that you and I would rather not go. Prisons, cancer waiting rooms, unemployment lines, divorce courts, hospital rooms, homeless shelters. And when God changes us and puts us in those places, we need to rejoice and say, God, I don't like this, but I'm going to be the best person there is around to point people to you in this situation. When we begin to put God in every devastating circumstances, then we can serve him wherever we are. But we have to learn to forget the past. Philippians 3:13 says, "Brethren, I do not regard myself as having laid a hold of it yet, but one thing I do, forgetting what lies behind and reaching forward to what lies ahead." In order to move on, to live our new normal, we have to forget the way things used to be. We have to look to today, to the place you are right now, and stand on his promise that all things, tragedy, heartache, change, is going to work together for good. So when you find yourself in a new normal, don't shut down, don't give up, don't become bitter. Do what Joseph did, which was bloom where you are planted. So our encouraging truth number 83 is new normals can be a really good thing. Let's let that happen. I hope you have a really good week.